Welcome to the Brickhouse of Art. I'm your host, Brick Astley. The purpose of this talk show is to talk to one-on-one artists and creators on all the blockchains. Today's guest, I have Vlad, a photographer, studio photographer, that does 3D artworks and aerial photography, currently fascinated with cinematic photos. Vlad, how are you doing today? We really appreciate your time here on the Brickhouse of Art.
GM Rick. Well, I'm doing really fine, and I have spent the entire day preparing for upcoming series. I'm trying to do like 10 different things at the same time, so I have a lot in my mind right now, and I'm trying to not let them all spill out because some of them I want to keep a bit of a secret on. But I'm really happy. I just got a beat, and that will always put a smile on my face, and yeah, doing pretty well.
Hey, let's talk about that real quick. Yeah, we got a bid on the live auction that you have with the Jom Shoots, the collaborative effort, Cinematic Lights. Can you talk to me a little bit about this collab and what it means to get a bid so early on in the auction?
Yeah, well, I and John were chatting on Discord in one evening, and he was showing some of the shots that in the afternoon on a talk, and this shot came up, and he was like, "Yo, do you want to try maybe edit it and see how it would look with your style on it?" And I'm always up for an editing challenge. It's something that it's really near and dear to my heart. And while I'll talk about it, I do have a challenge for you, Brick. Can you find a person in that photo? Because there is one person in the photo. And like the really fun thing is that I edited mostly like let's see how it happens, how it works with Jam on Discord, doing it live, sharing my screen. And afterwards, John came up with the idea of let's try and do this and turn this into a collab. But the thing is that I never saved the file from the original edit, and I had to basically go at it again and re-edit the entire photos a few days after when we decided that this is gonna be a collab. And yeah, the second time came even better. Like the edited, I'm more happy with the second edit that what I did in that evening. And really funny thing is that in between my two edits, Jom also took a shot of editing the photo. And it was the third time when I was editing it again live on Discord with the camera on, when we actually realized that there is a person in the photo.
That's pretty funny. The third or fourth pass, realizing that there is a person in the photo. So congratulations on the bid. Start of a successful auction. It goes for another 23 hours. So we'll have to schedule another interview to circle back and see how this one, how the rest of this auction fares. Good luck there on this auction with Jom. So for those that are meeting you for the first time, what brought you to Web3 and to the blockchain, to mint NFTs, to mint your photography, and how did you link up with Jom to do this collab?
Well, this is a bit of a long story. I joined the NFTs, I think, more than a year ago for the first time, and it was not my true face showing. In those COVID times, I started experimenting with 3D. I've learned Blender. That's a really, really awesome software that I encourage everyone to check it out if they want to learn 3D. And what I was doing in Blender was 3D artworks with the Outruns cyberpunk aesthetics. And on my Instagram dedicated to 3D artwork, some of them got really popular, and I was really into that vibe. So I came into the NFT space when there was basically no photography. And I was like, okay, what can I do here? Can I sell my 3D artworks? Can I actually make some money in those harsh times with this new thing that I'm playing with? And yeah, I could. I've sold on Raribles of all places. And it was from a shield thread. Like my experience was even though I made money, it was a happy experience. I didn't learn a ton. Like I joined Twitter, the NFT side of Twitter, and what I did back then, we didn't have spaces, and was like, okay, post your stuff in shield threads. And this collector came up to me and said that, well, I really like this page that you posted on Twitter, but you don't have it on Rarible. Can you mint it? And I was like, well, I could, but I'm too poor to actually mint it right now. And but I do have this other similar piece of work up. And he was like, well, I'm buying this piece just so we can mint the second one. And I basically got 2 sales in one day from the same person. And that was my start
Hey,
in
how cool is
NFTs.
that? That's a pretty unique experience. Run the gambit and put it up on the shell thread, and then the collector comes in and wants to buy it, but then also picks up another piece too. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was a really surreal experience. Like I was pretty much a noob in 3D. Like I had under 6 months under my belt, and to make money out of that without a client, it's amazing.
So, what brought you to the Solana blockchain? I see we've got cinematic, we've got the impossible shots there on exchange art, but then also on form function, we have infrared, a new world, and just can you talk to me a little bit about what brought you to Solana?
Yeah, well, after those 2 sales, I was chatting with this collector of mine, and he encouraged me to start posting photography. But it was more than a year ago, and photography had no place in the NFTs. So I minted some of my photos. There were 360 photos, and literally nobody cared about it. It was all 3D back then. And after a while, I got frustrated and I gave up. I joined the NFT bandwagon again in January. And what I did was the usual. Well, Ethereum is the biggest thing. There is where I'm gonna start. And the general feel was that if you got a foundation invite, you're pretty much set and you're gonna sell. I found out the hard way that it was not like that. I paid huge amount of money in gas, and what kept me around was the spaces and getting to actually chat with photographers all over the world, learning, making friends. And to get to Solana, there is this one guy called Walid. He's a photographer from Dubai. You probably heard about him before.
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
I followed Walid in a Solana space. I don't remember sure if it was the Solpix photo critique with Nick or if it was the shutter with Joe, but there's where it started. And the thing that really piqued my interest in the first Solana space was like, whoa, those people actually know each other and like care about each other's day. Because in Solana spaces, there's this weird feeling that everybody knows each other and they're a huge family that actually care about each other, unlike the huge Ethereum spaces that I've been into before that, where everyone was just chilling their work. And that's what made me stay in the beginning. So I started reading about Solana, understanding what are the platforms that are here for us 101 artists. And I minted my first series on exchange. It was the Dream World series, infrared photography, and that for me was quite the interesting turning point. Being able to sell infrared photography is something that I would have never thought of because I'm living in Romania and there's not a market for infrared photography here, pretty much. So yeah, that's how I started on Solana.
Hey, thank you for that. Uh, it's always interesting to see how artists come to the different various blockchains, and to hear the stories of what they go through to get there. Really I'm looking at the exchange pieces that you sold. Wedico picked up a piece. Cuban, Santos. These are some really stunning images that you have there. But you also have a series on form function, infrared, a new world. Looks like on Overview, First View, and Midnight Boom. All editions are sold out, and then we have some editions left here with Walk Around. Can you talk to me a little bit about the infrared photography? How you go about it? Do you need any special equipment for your camera? Do you just use like a regular DSLR? How do you go about capturing infrared photography?
Well, it's a bit of a funny story behind my journey with infrared. I found a guy on Instagram. I know he's also in NFT. I think his name is Noel Ads or something like that. I can send you a link afterwards and we can shout him out properly because the guy is really a master and he has educational videos on YouTube. So it was a really good starting point for me. I ordered an infrared filter to begin with, and I was like, okay, what do I do with it now? Because I didn't have a modified DSLR. And I started experimenting, realized that my phone has a really weak IR blocking glass in it. So the first camera that I used for infrared photography was my phone. That's a bit of an old route. I wrote an article about that, and that was picked up by Petapixel and DIY Photography. And even today, I've got DMs saying that for this article, you opened a new world into my photography. I'm experimenting with infrared on the phone because of the article, and I liked it. I really enjoyed infrared. It's quite an interesting rabbit hole to go down into, and I started looking into modifying cameras because in Romania we have no company that would modify them for us. I picked up a screwdriver and go at it, and now I have two cameras that are completely modded in house. One of them is full spectrum, and the other one is modified to 450 nanometers in wavelength. So yeah, my way of doing things has always been like, if you cannot buy it or can't afford to buy it, let's see how you can compensate with brain for the lack of money in the pocket.
No, that's interesting. How do you go about modifying the wavelength? How did you identify that it needed to be the wavelength that needed to be altered? And how do you go in to tell the camera this is the wavelength to capture at?
Well, normal cameras, like the camera sensor sees ultraviolet light, sees the normal visible light that you and I see, and also is able to capture infrared. And usually, in order for the cameras to only show the visible light, they have two layers of glass on top of the sensor. One is blocking UV light, and the other one is blocking infrared. But in most modern cameras, it's not such a clear separation between which glass does what. So most of us remove both of them, and we're left with a full spectrum camera. Now, if you want to block visible light from hitting your sensor and only capture infrared, you have to add another layer of coated glass that's usually very deep dark red on the sensor itself. So you're doing hardware modification at this point. You're taking out glass that is soldered to the camera sensor and replacing it with something else. You do this based on internet tutorials and reading a lot before starting doing it. But it's a fun process, and I do feel that it's a lot less complicated than most people would expect. Because I see people around being a bit scared to actually clean the sensor of a DSLR, and I'm the guy who's always telling them you're not even touching the sensor. Like when you clean the sensor of a normal DSLR camera, you're basically cleaning the glass that's on top of the sensor. So don't worry about scratching it that much. It's really hard to do.
Absolutely. I that's camera taking care of a camera shouldn't be that over complex, but it seems like it would be really kind of almost intimidating to the photographer because they're just used to using the machine, not necessarily opening it up and soldering or operating within it. But I want to talk about you have this very distinct like pinks and like golden tones in this series, A New World. Can you talk to me about where these were captured, and is that like a natural default for the infrared of the modified cameras, and what camera were these shot on that was modified?
Well, these ones are shot with a Nikon D5000. I'm using a filter. It's a full spectrum camera, and I'm using a filter, but I'm not going to disclose the wavelength because it's something rather unique that I haven't seen anyone do before. So for now, that is a secret only for me to know. But in terms of where are they shot, they're all shot in my hometown of Brasov in Romania. And this series is it's more than a photography series. It's first of all editions, because I want to get more people to know about infrared, and what better way to let more people in on this world than making more photos available, basically. And this photo also has a bit of a gamification element to it. The entire series, I'm like I've spent so much time inside and learned how to do the colors that you see, because in camera, like in infrared, your any bush is gonna look like white or bluish, but with what we call channel swapping, it's the technique. You're basically inverting the red and blue channels in the photo. You get the pinkish or yellowish vegetation, and usually you get blue sky. But again, with the wavelength that I'm using here, I can push it towards very yellowy golden tones in the sky. And what I want to do is create a parallel universe to the reality, and compensate for how little I've traveled in the past, and use the series as both a means to my financials, and a reason for me to go travel and explore my own country. So collectors in the future will have options on where do I go and explore, because we're explorers of the new world of infrared that I'm creating. And I'm gonna go explore my own country and take infrared photos for them to see and collect and enjoy.
Hey, these are incredible. You get some a very specific color palette that's immediately identifiable, and I think that's a hallmark of a blue chip photographer. These are just iconic, and I'm looking forward. I'm gonna probably go ahead and pick up an edition here on walk around when I sign in here, because it's a stunning image, and the fact that it's your home country, hometowns, is just really wonderful. Love to highlight that. Again, I want to thank you so much for your time here to talk about your work on the blockchain. Um, is there any final closing comments or advice you would give to new photographers to the blockchain, that are looking to pursue a career or a part-time gig in NFTs or photography on the blockchain?
Well, there is one realization that I've came into it part. I think it was the half of my first series with infrared. Uh, Selling on Solana, even though some of us call it, some of us, not some of it people call it the poor people network. I think it's a bit of a shit statement, and they're looking down on us because we sell for smaller prices. But I realized that, for example, as I'm trained as a portrait photographer, that's where I started. If I go out on a photo shoot with a client for a client, I'm gonna have to deal with a creative direction that's outside from what I like. I'm gonna have to deal with a model that's there to follow their own interests, be it monetary or for portfolio. And like I'm basically a camera for hire. But in Solana, even though we sell for smaller prices when we're beginners, I did the math, and I would get 2 times more than I would normally charge for a set of 5 portraits. So in the end, I can do whatever I want. I enjoy it. I can play with infrared if I feel like playing with infrared. I can play with portraits or with 360 photography, things that are a bit out of the ordinary for the normal commercial route of a photographer. And even selling for 1 Solana a pop, I can still do whatever I like and enjoy my photography and my career a lot more than I would do out there in the commercial world. So that's why I do encourage every photographer to check out the NFT world, and especially Solana community. It's so warm and so welcoming, and yeah, I think that's the reasons why I'm here, and I'm here to stay.
Bullish on you, Vlad. Really appreciate again your time being here to talk about your work and how experimental the infrared photography is. And I look forward to seeing you capture more of your country and more of the world through your lens. I'm absolutely in love with this color palette. So gorgeous. That in mind, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, be kind to Mother Earth. Always, always have a GM.